container. Cease securing the room. Secure the biohazard container. One Op 4 remaining. Blue 4 eliminated Op 4.
Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here, bringing out some more Rainbow Six Siege. This is the technical test that has been administered over the last week, starting on the 21st of September, which was Monday. And as you can probably tell, things have changed. So, what exactly has changed? Is it for the better? Has the game essentially improved since the closed alpha, when I so harshly ridiculed its nature and core gameplay mechanics and everything about it? Has it improved? To put it simply, it has. For the better? For the most part. It's not 100% set to the way, obviously, that traditional Rainbow Six fans would like to see it. And for those people, I would still recommend games like Ground Branch and Squad, as well as Interstellar Marines. But for the most part, the game has improved. So let's go down the list of things that have actually improved. One, voice chat. That was a big problem back in the day because there was no way to make it push to talk. The mics were always on. There was no real way to turn them off unless you muted everybody. And now that has been fixed. Now you have the ability to push to talk, and you can control the volume of your voice as well as the incoming voice chat volume. Actually, all the options, the whole entire options menu is actually phenomenal now. It's really, really good. Has an FOV slider with actual numbers telling you what the FOV is, which goes all the way up to 90. It has a lot of details in there with explanations for almost every single option and setting you can think of, which is really, really good. And there's a fair amount of customization for your heads-up display, which for the most part would put you at a disadvantage because, let's just be honest here, turning off certain things would make you obviously not have an advantage. But for the most part, everything in that particular area is phenomenal. The only thing I wish that they would add is maybe, unless they can fix this problem, which is directly related to Uplay. Now, if you guys are familiar with Steam and Steamworks games, Steam allows you to select your microphone and what the audio plays out of and all that stuff. We all know that. And certain games that are on Steam, like CSGO and whatever, will allow you to choose the microphone that is through your Steam client. Other games that aren't, you have to choose the microphone manually in the options menu. Now, with Uplay, it has the same thing. You're allowed to choose which microphone you want within the Uplay client. However, within this particular technical test, it did not let you choose. It wouldn't work. It wasn't in sync. The game would automatically pick your default microphone, which for me is obviously the microphone I use to record commentaries with and do my videos, because that's like the microphone I use. It's better quality, it's obviously significantly better in every single way, other than the fact that it's in your face, because it's like a studio mic. And that is my default device, but then my default communication device would be my headset, which is what I would use when playing CSGO and all those other games, because the microphone's closer to my mouth. It's not, I don't need to have this thing in my face. Just, you know, it's a little bit easier. It's like there's more simplicity there. But the thing is, even though you have it set as default communication device, the game will not pick it up. It'll still default to your original microphone. So it's not a big deal. You can just go into the options and change it to being, hello, I want my headset to be the default mic, and then start it up again, and then there you go. It's fine. But having an option to choose would be nice if you want to switch back and forth between the two, or whatever reason. Everyone likes options, and those options are things that I think need to be in the game. Allow you to choose which microphone specifically you would like to use. And if that isn't going to be a thing, at least have it sync up with Uplay, where it works perfectly, so you can actually switch back between the options and whatever, because that would be nice. Uplay has its own push-to-talk button, which is separate from the game's push-to-talk button, so I don't know exactly how that would work, but, you know, figure it out, because I need to have the option to be able to choose which one I want, without having to go back into Windows and setting defaults and all that kind of stuff and relaunching Uplay and whatever so it recognizes. It's just this whole ordeal that people don't really like to bother with. It's you know, little things like that are just tedious. Not game breaking, not a huge problem, but just little things like that that are tedious. Having those options there would be nice. And considering everything else is excellent, it'd be nice to have that as well. Anyway, moving on. Something else that's actually changed for the better is that they actually added the ability to select which fire rate you want to use. You have a fire selector lever now. You can choose whether or not you want to use semi-automatic, burst fire, or fully automatic, depending on the weapon variant that you are currently using. Here's the thing, though. There is literally zero reason to use anything other than fully automatic, because the recoil, the weapon handling, when aiming down your sights, is pinpoint accurate and super easy to maintain, and basically, it's literally a water gun. You're just hosing fools down, and that's what the game feels like. Whether or not this stuff is going to change in the future, I don't know, but considering it hasn't changed much from the alpha, it is a bad step, because that is just, I don't know, I mean, they add that, which is nice to have, but I mean, it's kind of pointless when there's literally no benefit to using it. It is kind of a shame, because, I don't know, I mean, it's there, but I would advise against it. I've tried it, I've gotten killed repeatedly, because it's just, there's no point. It's like the high rate of fire and the ease of shooting in fully automatic, it just completely negates the fact that even wanting to use semi-automatic. It's completely pointless. It'll just get you killed. Which leads me to my next point, hip firing. You guys may have remembered my insane rage rant at the closed alpha, hip firing being one of the main topics of conversation. I can honestly say that they went in the completely opposite direction of what I was referring to and would like to have seen. What I mean by that is they made a hip firing even less viable than it was before. It is insanely inaccurate now. In fact, when I'm firing, it doesn't even feel like my bullets are exiting my barrel. It's so ineffective and pointless. There's literally zero reason, like the fire selector switch, to use anything other than your sights to engage a threat. The only time I actually found using hip fire and using your crosshairs to be viable is when you were using the shield, and the reason why is because they changed the way the shield functions now. Back during the alpha, if you had the shield up, it would be down by default, and then if you held up your iron sights for your pistol, he would use the shield as a shield. He would hold it out in front of him. Now, it's default where he just holds it in front of him, and you have your weapon sticking out the side, which is your regular hipfire kind of crosshair and everything that's going on there. But then when you aim down your sights, he lowers the shield, exposing his left shoulder and his head. Which doesn't really make sense. I mean, you picture about holding your shield like that with your arm, and it's like you're twisting your arm at an odd angle, but whatever. I understand for balance purpose, if you want to be more accurate, guess what? You expose yourself a little bit more. Okay, that's fair. Like, I'm totally fine with that. However, the fact that hip firing for assault rifles and submachine guns are so grossly over-exaggerated that they're tremendously unrealistic is not a good gameplay mechanic. I can't fathom why developers think it's a good idea to literally make weapons to make you fire like a claymore. And what I mean by that is that your rounds just go in all directions all at once in a huge radius, even though your barrel is pointed within a 1-foot radius in front of your body. So why are my bullets deviating all over the place? Stupid, terrible gameplay mechanics. That's literally all that is. It's some kind of terrible balancing to enforce aiming down your sights, which, in real life, you're not using your sights in close quarters all the time. Only when you're going for those very, very critical shots, which again, isn't in fully automatic. So there's so many discrepancies here that are just not really lining up properly. But then again, what were you expecting from a game that's trying to be a little bit more arcadey than it is trying to be realistic? So, as I'm trying to say, there are improvements. Those are some of the improvements. The hipfire not being so much, obviously. That kind of went in the other direction. But again, slower gameplay. They kind of managed to somehow achieve making players slower, which makes the game feel a little slower, but it's not quite 100% there yet. This comes down to how fast and rapidly you can strafe back and forth, which was also an issue I discussed in that video prior, that makes the game feel tremendously arcadey and feel a hell of a lot like Call of Duty. People don't like to admit this. People want to say, especially if you read on the official forums, people are saying you cannot compare the two. They do not feel the same at all. Well, here's the reality. During the Call of Duty sale, I purchased Call of Duty Black Ops 2. For two reasons. One, I actually liked that particular game in the series, and two, it's the most popular on Steam. Has the biggest player base. Going into that game, holding up the Scar H or any other particular weapon, and you say you put the stock attachment so you can move faster, and you're aiming down your sights, and you're moving around, and then you go and play Rainbow Six Siege, and you do the exact same thing. They feel almost identical. There is literally no difference, and in fact, Call of Duty actually one-ups Rainbow Six by actually having the weapon bob when you're walking. Rainbow Six Siege doesn't even have that. The weapon is completely stationary, 100% completely still when walking around, which doesn't really make sense because, again, one, not realistic, and two, you go from the idea of hip firing being incredibly inaccurate to going to aim down sights, which is just pinpoint accurate. Like, it's two wildly different extremes, which, again, doesn't make sense and is just frustrating. It really is. It's such an annoying gameplay mechanic. I don't know why they decided to go in that direction of making the bullets originate from the center of your screen in addition to having cone of fires. It's just, I mean, cone of fires work when they work in the traditional sense of how they were meant to function. How are they meant to function? A cone of fire is represented by a crosshair. Where the crosshair is indicates where your rounds are going to land at any given range. So the further away I am from an obstacle, naturally the more surface area, that crosshair covers, meaning all my rounds will spread within that particular cone of fire. The closer I am, the more accurate it is. But when you have bullets landing outside the crosshair, or the crosshair spreads dramatically when you're firing, kind of negates the whole purpose of having cone of fires. They're there to represent where the bullets will land, but they deviate drastically all over the place in a very unrealistic manner. Now, if you have followed, which you probably haven't, but the developer of Ground Branch worked on the original Ghost Recon. One of the things he said, because people were referring to the original Ghost Recon not being 100% realistic. The game is realistic, a lot more realistic than most shooters out there, but it's not 100% realistic because you cannot properly and adequately be fast and aggressive, which is a real thing, by the way. In the real military, speed and aggression is the #1 way to dominate the enemy and kill the living shit out of them. You can't achieve that with games that have insane crosshair spread when you're moving too quickly. It makes actually moving through the environment fast and being able to stop and engage a target really quickly almost impossible because you're waiting for the crosshairs to slowly come back to center so you can have those accurate shots. That's how Ghost Recon functioned. The difference was, back then, the reason why these cone of fires and crosshair spread things got away with the way they functioned is because of the technological limitation of the time. This developer admitted that himself. This was a culmination, that crosshair, minus having an actual weapon model, the fact that the weapon model wasn't even in the screen, allowed you to kind of have that crosshair represent all things. So it represented fatigue, it represented movement penalties, it represented all the kind of consequences you can possibly be under as a shooter. It was a culmination of all of those things. So why they're still around, why that particular gameplay mechanic is still around in shooters today when we can technologically show you that in fact, that is not how things function. There is no reason for that particular thing to transfer over, that particular core mechanic of crosshair function and cone of fires, to carry over into games where we have weapon models in first person which clearly show the weapons pointed straight, that don't correlate with where the trajectory of the rounds actually go, and the fact that we have aim down sights and all these other things that can really better represent how a weapon fires and feels when you're moving and shooting using it. I can't fathom who thinks it's a good idea to do things like that. Like, you look at games like Arma, that is a prime example of how crosshairs should work. Because the bullets never stray outside of your crosshairs. That is a perfect representation of, it's a random spread pattern, it is, but it stays within the confines of the crosshair, and the crosshair doesn't spread to most ridiculously unrealistic types of angles. So it's still realistic, because point shooting is viable, but not exactly 100% predictable. What I mean by that is you can know the general direction of where your rounds are going to go, you can be accurate when you're firing, but at the same time, under crazy situations, you can point the weapon in a certain direction, but the rounds may not go exactly where you're anticipating them to go. This is why point shooting and practicing and over again repetitive nature and training helps you to eliminate that kind of second guessing of where your rounds are going to go. It helps you kind of predict the natural way you point the weapon. It's literally, as one person put it, as easy as pointing your finger at something. You literally just point your arm out, point at something in a distance, and that's point shooting, but you're doing it with a weapon. Same concept, that easy. Bullets go in that direction, just like your fingers pointing in that direction. It's like, you know, barrels can be anywhere between friggin' 12 to 15 inches long, or even 8 inches, depending on the... my point is, barrels are long. There's no reason why your bullets would be hitting the floor in front of you when you're aiming straight. I digress. I just realized I went on another rant about cone of fires and hip firing, but I mean, it's something I can't stand in games nowadays when they're over-exaggerated. I mean, I'm totally fine with them being smaller and tighter and more natural, but when they're all over the place and unrealistic and completely unpredictable, and then suddenly aiming down your sights is like super precise, that's when I draw the line and call it tremendous bullshit, and just, I hate it. I hate it. And if you haven't noticed that yet, then I hate it. I'm telling you this. It's deplorable. It's disgusting. It's a very, very terrible way of replicating the way a weapon feels when you're firing it. And it's just, anyway. Enough of that. I'm already 50 minutes in this video and I barely covered any of the positives of this game. So, you can lean without aiming down your sights. But then again, it's negated by the fact that hip firing is so terrible. So, you know, it's little trade-offs like that, but for the most part, the game feels slower. It's way more polished around the edges. They actually got rid of hip markers that appear through walls and stuff. That's all stuff that was known. They changed the way shields feel. The options menu is phenomenal. I mean, it's really good. Like, I mean, I'm utterly impressed, other than the fact that you can't choose which microphone you want. Most of the game feels better. Operators, the way you actually choose them now, you unlock them with renown. You acquire renown by leveling up and playing matches, and winning or losing, either way you're getting it, so it's totally fine. And it's a fun game still. Alright, like I said that back in the time, or back during the alpha, I said, you know, although I have all these problems, the game is still fun. And it's even more fun now because things seem a little bit more fleshed out. It's still a fun game. I'm not discrediting the enjoyment you get out of this game, because it's still there. It still feels tactical to a degree, but it's not 100%. Like I said, it's not quite there yet. There's still so many things I would like to see improved or completely, utterly overhauled, but it's a fun game for what it is. I just really wish, like most of us that are, you know, old school Rainbow Six fans, that they didn't name the game Rainbow Six, just because it's kind of a slap in the face to all Rainbow Six fans. It doesn't feel like a Rainbow Six game. It feels like a really awesome shooter that has weird gameplay core mechanics, but I mean, for the most part, it's still a phenomenal game. It's just, it's not true to what true hardcore tactical shooters are. As I said, Ground Branch, Squad, look at those. Even Arma 3 does an excellent job. They're far excelling in that field compared to Rainbow Six Siege. Siege is still a great game, but it's not quite there. And what makes me even more frustrated is when I'm reading on the forums, the official forums because I've been posting on there regularly, I've been having debates with people, I've been discussing things, and a lot of individuals are actually frustrated, get this, that the cover system from Vegas 1 and 2 are gone. They think that a proper tactical shooter should have a third-person cover system. My god, the face palming and the cringing I was having reading those comments, it's like, it's just, oh god, you know, it's just, it hurts, it kills me, it bleeds me slowly. I don't understand how you can possibly think a cover system like that is a realistic and useful tool in a hardcore tactical shooter. In a tactical shooter, period. Doesn't have to be hardcore, doesn't have to be realistic. In a tactical shooter, period. Being able to see around corners with not your eyes, some kind of like out-of-body experience to see around, like, no! Absolutely not. That is completely retarded. Like, why they thought that was a good... And then they're talking about good old Rainbow Six, and they're talking about Vegas and Vegas 2. Oh, God. This is what I'm talking about. There are people who are playing this game who think that Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2 are the definition, the very definition, of hardcore tactical shooters. For the love of God, fuck no. Alright? Like, you people need to educate yourself, go out in the world, and see what a real tactical shooter is. Because I am telling you right now that Vegas 1 and 2, although are friggin' fun as hell and, you know, really good games and by themselves, do not represent real tactical shooters in the slightest. Okay? This is a fact. Because we all know, as traditional fans that played Rainbow Six, Rogue Spear, and even Rainbow Six 3, and hell, even Rainbow Six 3 Black Arrow on the consoles, alright? Those games, even Lockdown. I mean, even that game did some things right. But as soon as Vegas came out and it had the cover system, everybody lost their shit. They were like, what is this? This is ridiculous. Crazy character customization. What is this? This is ridiculous. Me being young, I'm like, oh, cool, yeah, being able to customize yourself. Oh, cool, third-person cover system so I can see how cool my customized character looks. That's like the ADD COD-driven individual. As an actual tactical shooter, that is just, no. Absolutely not. Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Shouldn't even be in the game. So when I'm seeing people complain that it's gone, it's like, please get out, because leaning and not putting your back to a wall, I don't know if people realize this, and some people were actually talking about this as well, is saying that you would never, under any circumstance, ever put your back to a wall when using it as cover. Movies, games depict this all the time. It is the most grossly inaccurate thing and the most ridiculously dangerous thing you can possibly do. You want to get killed? Put your back to a wall. Because you're not going to be able to fire back at the enemy anywhere near as effectively as you would if you were actually facing the wall and leaning out. Which is what you do in real life. You face the enemy. You always keep the plates that are in your freaking tac vest, that are in your vest, all your armor, all your protection, you keep it pointed at the enemy. So if you do end up taking and absorbing a round, chances are it's not going to kill you. Or it won't penetrate through, and it'll just hit your armor and get stopped. All while you'll still be able to effectively return fire. Unless you take a high caliber round or you get surprised or whatever and it knocks you over. Whatever. It's all situational. But the point is, you point yourself towards the enemy and you lean out. Because if you do this, it allows you to have the speed and agility required to quickly acquire targets. Target acquisition, firing at the enemy, all that stuff. Being able to point yourself at the enemy, lean out, is a lot faster than having your back to the cover and trying to turn around and shoot it. Like, no. You can even see in the movies how terrible it is they're firing. They're blind firing. You always see in movies that depict special operators or people that are really, you know, that know what they're doing, not putting their back to walls, and people that don't know what they're doing, putting their back to walls and blind firing and screaming like idiots. Because guess what? They don't know how to fight in a gunfight. Anyway. There's a lot of things like that that are just, I'm glad are gone. Huge step in the right direction. But, I mean, there are a lot of people that are trying to bring this game down. It's a shame. It's really depressing seeing the people that think they know what they're talking about when it comes to tactical shooters, and then they go ahead and discuss cover systems. It's like, just, please no. Alright, like, I understand you may like that kind of thing. That's fine. Find a game that lets you have that, alright? Like, I even like games like that. I thoroughly enjoyed Vegas and Vegas 2, but I mean, what I want Siege to be is not that. I want it to be like a traditional shooter. And even then, it's not what I want it to be, because it's not meeting my expectations at all. It's still a fun game, as I said. Because, you know, games can still be fun if they don't meet your expectations. But it's not what I wanted. Thankfully, like I said, there's Ground Branch. Ground Branch is pretty much exactly what I want, which is like, amazing. It's literally the holy grail of what I'm trying to talk about. Ground Branch. Alright, I made videos about it in the past. I want to continue making videos in the future. I will be making videos. And then there's Squad, which is also, it's like the same thing, kind of. I don't want to say it's the same thing at all. It's an infantry. It's like, a realistic, very realistic shooter that plays like a tactical shooter, but on massive battlefields. So think of it's literally Battlefield, but realistic. I don't know. It's just, whatever. That's a terrible, I'm explaining that really, really bad. Do not listen to that phrase. That was a very terrible way of explaining it. But anyway, those games do things phenomenally. And Rainbow Six does things differently, but it's still fun. So there's that. The last thing I want to talk about is one thing I got in a huge debate with on the forums, and that's about pricing. The price of this game. This is what I want to finish off with, and I'll probably make more follow-up videos. I'll probably end up live streaming this game this weekend. And I may have a couple of codes I might be able to give away for people to come play with me. That may be happening during this whole weekend, so I might live stream. That's the plan. No promises, but I really would love to get around to live streaming this game the entire weekend. Anyway, that aside, last thing I want to talk about is the price tag. because this is a $60 game, US. USD, $60. Now on PC, this is like equating, on Steam, this is $80 Canadian. Okay. In comparison, I paid $40 Canadian for The Witcher 3. I paid $75 Canadian for Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. And you're expecting me to pay $80 for Rainbow Six Siege. There are only 4 other titles, standalone titles. This is not counting DLC and all kinds of collections. There are only 4 other titles, or maybe 5, on the entire Steam client, the entire Steam store, that is sold for $80. This being one of them. Can you possibly justify that price for the amount of content that you're getting here? Personally, to me, as one person put it, I tend to agree with them. I agree with them through and through. That when you're selling me a game that does not have a campaign mode, to me it feels like I'm playing half a game. If you're giving me a game that's only multiplayer focused, has no campaign, purely multiplayer, co-op doesn't count because co-op is essentially still multiplayer and you're playing against bots on the same multiplayer maps. That to me is half a game. That does not justify a full price of $80 Canadian or $60 American on Steam for what I'm getting here. At all. This obviously is up for debate. It's a very tricky thing to discuss because everyone has their own opinions and their own ideas on what they think is acceptable and tolerable and whatever. The guy I got in an argument with or got in a debate with and we were talking, he was a console player, so naturally console games are $60. Okay, that's different. I'm talking, we're on PC here, Steam. Digital download games on Steam, which is literally every game you buy on Steam, is well known for being significantly cheaper than buying full retail hard copy games for consoles. Everyone knows this. This is why people argue that in the long run, PC gaming is superior in every way in terms of financial reasonings as well. It's not just like, oh yeah, better graphics, better everything, but in the end, you're paying for games that are significantly cheaper, which aren't even taxed. So just, you know, all this stuff. So it's really annoying seeing this game being sold for 80 bucks. I can't justify the price. I would never buy this for $80. The most I would pay would be like 70 bucks. And even then, I would feel terrible about it because this game feels like it could be the next Titanfall. And what I mean by that is it feels like it can die off really quickly because it'll get stale very quickly. I don't like to think that way, but it seems like that's the reality because even playing the closed beta, or the technical test, closed beta opens up tomorrow. Even playing that, after like, I played what, 20 some matches, I'm level 10 now, I'm already kind of bored. Already. And, you know, that's not a very, because it seems, it's a very repetitive game. Not that being repetitive is terrible, but I mean, when you put in the fact that the core mechanics aren't, like I got in another conversation with that same individual and I was saying how I can play the same map with the same weapon over and over and over again if the core mechanics are amazing. And I could. And I have. Lots of games. I mean, here, let's look at CSGO. I can play Dust 2 all day, every day for the rest of my life with the same weapon all the time. Because fundamentally, at its core, the game is friggin' stellar for what the game is trying to achieve. And that's it. Like, I don't need fancy stuff, but Rainbow Six just has this weird feel about it that's just not exactly the greatest thing ever. It needs to be improved tremendously. There needs to be a lot of things changed, like there needs to be added weapon sway when you're in first person. Even when you're standing still, there needs to be weapon variation when you're holding the sight. It can't be perfectly still, alright? That's just Call of Duty-fies the living shit out of the game. You cannot have that. Add some weapon sway, add some deviation, make hip firing more viable, but I guess they're not going to do that since they went the complete opposite. It's almost like they were trolling me. And make firing the weapon from your shoulder and fully automatic actually more detrimental to your accuracy. You need to make it have a consequence. When you're firing a weapon fully automatic, even when your shoulder, it's like it's more unstable. Everyone knows this. Single semi-automatic fire is easily the best. Having fire selector switches is kind of useless whenever there's really no benefit to using it. When spraying and praying, precision is, like I'm talking, this is even easy to do without having a foregrip. And the laser sight, even attaching the laser sight, makes the hip fire feel totally useless. I won games where I dedicated myself to use the laser sight to just determine whether or not it's just me or if the gun actually is really terribly inaccurate. And it is terribly inaccurate. Like I said, the shield is the only viable use, and the reason why is because I would fire the weapon very slowly. I would take a shot, I would wait for the crosshair to recenter, then I would take a shot, and since I can do that because I have a shield, it allows me to sit there and wait for my crosshair to reset without spraying. If you spray, then you're not going to hit anything. Your friggin' rounds are flying everywhere. So, firing from the hip is only really viable if you're aiming at something literally less than 5 feet, maybe 10 feet in front of you. Any further, and it's just like, you're not going to hit anything. So, we're coming up on 30 minutes here. That's all I'm going to end on. Price, I want to hear your discussions. I mean, I don't know whether or not what you've seen or what you heard, you think you can justify paying $60 US for this. I think paying 40 bucks, as well as a lot of other people seem to think $40 is a fair price for this. Especially max $50 American, we're talking here, right? You got to realize that there are obviously conversion fees, like, you know, paying, like, I mean, it kind of sucks because the Canadian dollar is also doing terribly right now, so obviously we're paying significantly more than we used to. It's like the worst it's been in like 5 years. It sucks. But whatever, you know, like, I can understand and totally be fine with that, especially how, like, you look at Australians and they pay a lot too, and there's a lot of problems like that with conversion and whatever. Like, but still, I mean, I'm looking at an American price tag, and 60 seems steep for what you're getting here. It really, really does. Anyone who says otherwise needs to go and look at the fucking Steam store and really tell me they think it's a fucking fair price. That's all I'm gonna say. Because it's just like, no. Absolutely not. People were even complaining about the price of MGS5. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. People were bitching about the price for that. I paid 75 Canadian for it. That game is huge. That game was amazing. Although it's missing some content that, you know, whatever, controversy there, you can read up online. So I mean, come on. I mean, really think about it. 80 bucks for this game, but whatever. Anyways, that's how I'm going to end the video, guys. I will probably make some more videos in the future. I'll try to live stream this coming the weekend. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening. And it maybe even if I decide to, you know, take the plunge, I might just buy myself the alpha access for Squad, which is coming up on the 26th of this weekend, and may end up playing that as well. It all depends. This is a very long video. I'm going to end it now. Thank you guys for coming out. It was a kind of crazy rant. I didn't really talk about much of the positives. I realize that now. I did say that it's improved slightly, which it has. But I mean, still, it's more or less exactly the same. A lot of the points I made in those past videos are pretty much the same. But, you know, whatever. You'll be able to, if you try to, you can get a hold of the beta this weekend. And I might give away a couple of codes as well. And you'll be able to see for yourself. So, my name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for coming out in this video. It's been long and tedious. If you watched the whole thing, hell yeah, you're kind of awesome. And I'll see you guys on the next one.